I'm Jason Kelly.
And this is a VHKK Kennel Kast.
Welcome back to the Votus House Kennel Cast. We're going to do a Votus House spotlight. Who is the spotlight on? It's a young lady that has been a part of Canine Solutions nearly from the beginning and plays an instrumental role in our day-to-day running. Doesn't really show up too often. You might hear a voice, or you might see her in a video, or you might see me refer to her on social media every so often. But she's definitely a behind-the-scenes kind of gal, and we're just about to bring her into the light. I'd like to introduce Desley Power, our initial puppy developer, and also has started helping with our litters that we have on the ground. Desley, welcome.
Thank you, Jason.
So we're just going to get straight into it. As with everything, we start at the beginning. You, dogs, how did it happen? Where did it happen? And we'll go from there.
Well, I've always been an animal lover, especially dogs and horses. And as a kid, I always went to my uncle's property in Western Queensland, a grazing property, and I loved going there. I could never be there enough. They, of course, had working dogs around the stock, and as a little kid, I'd walk around, get to know each dog, their personalities, their names, and it stood out to me how much they just loved working, and I loved the relationship that was formed with the stockman and the dogs. And as I went out there through into my teenage years, I got to go mustering and see the dogs actually working the stock in the muster and, of course, in the yards. And that just drew me into that so much. It's always great if you're working with animals to be able to form a true partnership where you work as one. And that's what inspires me with dogs.
You start living life, become a hairdresser, and then you're in Brisbane, is that right?
That's correct.
And what happens from there?
A girl that I worked with, she always had various breeds of dogs, and she said to me she was going to get a Rottweiler. And I knew absolutely nothing about the breed, and she invited me to go with her. So we went out to the breeder to have a look at the dogs and the puppies, and I was very impressed with these dogs. And what stood out to me was the breeder. They interviewed my friend, and it wasn't a case of whether she would choose a puppy. It was a case of whether they would let her have one. They were very, very careful about putting the puppy with the right person, and that was very impressive. So it was a great start for me in that breed. I went on to have my own Rottweilers, and that was my introduction to dog training.
Okay, so how was that as an introduction, starting with a Rottweiler?
It was great. I was very keen to get the Rottweiler out there in a more user-friendly manner, and instead of them just being famous for barking at people behind fences, etc. So I started doing dog agility with them, and we were very successful over time, and it was a lot of fun working around with Border Collies, and we actually did really well and actually trumped the Border Collies on quite a few occasions. Of course, in those days, agility was all about being accurate, not so much about speed, because it was like doing a sports car event with a diesel tractor. But still, we did very well, and it was a great fun thing and a great start into the dog training world.
Okay, so you're doing agility, you've got this big tank of a dog.
Yeah, well, I had one Rottweiler, the last one I had, and she was a bit different, very prey-driven dog, and she was quite a problem for a few people in the agility world. So I looked around for something that offered a more accurate sense of obedience, and I came across what was then called IPO.
Okay, just before you go on, so she was problematic for people in the agility world. What do you mean by that? What?
Well, in the kennel club world, in the local obedience clubs, etc., there isn't too much strict adherence to basic rules, and there's a lot of people who like to have their dogs running around free, and they run about and they make excuses for why they're a bit uncontrollable, and people think it's funny, etc. But my dog, she wanted to chase after quite a few of these small dogs. We lived on acreage, and she did chase hares that were somewhat bigger than some of the dogs she was interested in. So, yeah, I was sort of frowned upon a bit. And I thought, well, yeah, it would be a good thing to get absolute control and yet still have the dog free in her head to express herself. I didn't want to suppress her, but I wanted to find a way of keeping her under control and be still in a drivey state.
Okay. You're a bit cutting edge because suppression was the name of the game a lot back then.
Exactly. And I did have some problems. People didn't like it when I let her be a bit free-spirited in a class. They thought that was a bit off. But I didn't want to suppress her because to me, seeing that dog express herself was what really inspired me.
Okay, awesome. All right, so then you move on to Sport Dog?
Yes.
Let's go.
So I contacted a Sport Dog Club. It was the Gold Coast Sport Dog Club. And they said to me I could come along and just do some obedience training, which is what I wanted to do. I knew that my Rottweiler wouldn't really fit into the protection phase, but I was able to do obedience training there and some tracking, which was new for myself and the dog, and she did quite well in both of those things. And I loved seeing the Malinois. That's where I first saw them working, and I loved the bond that was created with the handler. And once again, that drew me back to that inspiring idea of working together with the dog.
Okay, so you kept persisting with your Rottweiler and...
Yeah, I took the Rottie really as far as I could. I didn't ever get to do any trialling with her because I was offered the opportunity to train a Malinois pup for the sport. And that was a great opportunity, and I took that on full steam and away we went. So got straight into that.
Okay, awesome. Rottweiler to Malinois?
Yes.
How did that look?
Well, obviously it was quite a step up. But I was very fortunate because the first Malinois I ever had, she was a very even dog. She wasn't extreme. She did really well in the sport, but she was very easy to live with as well. And of course I was attending the sport club all the time, so I could see how to develop this training, and I was able to put that into practice on this dog very successfully.
Okay. Tell me about the Malinois. How did she go? I take it was a
It was a female, female dog, and she did very well. She got several high-end trials. She made it all the way to IPO 3, and in 2013 she won the national trial in Adelaide.
Okay.
And she also got all the way to FH tracking. She was a very good tracking dog.
Excellent. What else stands out about her?
I think the fact that she was so trainable was what inspired me with her. And she really never failed. She was always ready to go and always keen to get involved and to do everything with me.
Okay. Because I know you, so I know you have more than one Malinois. So How did that come about?
Well, I felt like I'd sort of conquered that first mountain with her. So I wanted to go again. I wanted something a bit different, but still a Malinois. And so 18 months down the track, I got my second Malinois, and she was crazy. She was quite a different kettle of fish. But of course, that's a teaching thing, isn't it? You learn from these dogs. They become your teacher. And you have to expand your idea and do better work with them to make them come up to what they have to be, what you expect them to be, and what they are. So we did some different things with her. We did the sport, IPO, also did some dock diving or jetty jumping, as it's called in our area. And she was very successful at that. She loved that, and it gave her a chance to really put herself out there, which was great.
Okay, awesome. So Rottweiler to Malinois to a different type of Malinois. Are you learning yourself along the way, or
Absolutely.
is someone mentoring you, or are people mentoring, or are you looking on YouTube, or what's going on there?
Well, when I first found IPO, I was inspired by what I saw online from Michael Ellis, people like that, and also Forrest Mickey, and that sort of got me started with the Rottweiler. But once I was into the Malinois, we had the opportunity to have overseas trainers do seminars with our club, and there were a few German trainers who came out, and they were all about extreme precision, getting everything exactly right. So that was really, really good. And there's also a lot of stuff available online, but it's always better to be in the presence of these people, to work with them and be there to troubleshoot any problems that you have. And I had the privilege of training with Klaus Mallion to start with, and then Knut Fuchs, Arnold Cavacchio from Hungary, and we also did some work with Marek Urban. He was fantastic with the protection phase. So, and I love looking at what Peter Shirk does. That's very, very inspirational as well.
Okay, so the sport dogs bringing these trainers out. How does that go, the translation from Europe to Australia? Because obviously very different world over there. Everything's very established. Australia, not so much. How did you find the trainers when they came from Europe or America to Australia?
Yeah, I think the American trainers are a bit more relaxed, whereas the European trainers are very, very into everything being, very smart and very tight. But that was good because you got to see both sides of that, and it varies with every dog, and most of the time you can blend the two and do what works best for you.
Is there anything about any of those trainers that stands out above the rest, or is it bits from everyone?
I think it is bits from everyone, but I think for our sport of IPO, I do feel that the German trainers have it nailed. I think they've got it really, really happening in a tight frame, and that's what I like to see, and that's certainly the best way to be on the field.
Okay. All right, so you're developing your dog skills through the Gold Coast Sport Dog Club. You're making friends, furthering your own Malinois.
Yes.
And then you feel like you need more of a challenge. I guess that's where maybe the RAF foster program comes in. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, the lady who lives next to me, we're on acreage blocks, she was always into dogs as well. And she saw in a news program one morning how the RAF up at Amberley were looking for foster carers. They'd had a litter of 17 puppies, and they were asking for people to come forward as volunteers from the public to foster these pups. And she mentioned this to me, and I thought at the time, yeah, well, that's something I could do. I didn't really think too much about it, but then our Sport Dog Club had a seminar with a German police dog trainer, and a few of the RAF members attended that. And of course we got into conversation about the fostering, what it involves, what I'm supposed to do, what they expect, and it went from there. So I put in a formal application. I was given an informal interview, and members of the RAF came out to my property to make sure that it was secure and appropriate for their pups, and we got started from there.
Okay. Just because I was at the school at the same time that this was happening.
Yes.
Tilly,
Tilly.
the T litter, just an absolute powerhouse litter.
Yeah, well, she was my first foster pup.
Yeah.
And she was the only female that I fostered, but it was just awesome. It was just like having, obviously, another Malinois puppy. And I was free to do with her whatever I felt was appropriate. I wasn't put into any boundaries regarding training for a sport. I could just let her express herself and be full on, which is what we did.
Were there guidelines, or was it quite broad as to what the RAF were asking?
Yeah, it was very broad. The idea was to have her environmentally and socially sound so she could move around and be not afraid of things and be out in the public and be quite happy, all that sort of thing. And we went back a couple of times throughout the foster process, had assessment nights, and then of course I would see what they would do for assessment, and then I'd sort of do more of that at home, which involved some obstacle work and things like that. Because I already had agility equipment, I was well set up to do that sort of thing with Tilly as well.
And at what age did you hand her back?
She was about, I think, 5-6 months old when she went back.
Okay. Obviously a long road between you handing her back and her getting on course. So she goes back into I don't know how it works now, but back then she would go back into the puppy program a little bit before moving up into development. where we would get her ready for course. I remember her. She was an absolute standout. You did a fantastic job. She was a weapon. There was a little bit of a block in the road with her. We were prepping her for course, and she was an absolute monster. And then breeding came down, and they go, well, we're taking her. And so it goes along that way, and it ends up she isn't fit for breeding. So then she goes back into the program like 6 months later. Bit of a shame because in that 6 months, they don't do work with them. They're brood bitches. So, yeah, from my standpoint, I remember that very clearly. And I would love to them to do the testing and then let her keep going in development and then take her for breeding if she'd been successful. But it didn't work out that way. But I'm sure she would have ended up a weapon no matter what. So.
Yeah, well, I was very, very glad that she actually got back on course and was able to graduate as a military working dog.
Okay. Where did she end up?
She went to Townsville initially, but since then I don't know. I'm hoping that she's still having a happy life, whatever she's doing.
Yeah. Oh, you never know. Someone might hear this.
I'd
podcast
love to know.
Let us know.
Yeah, it'd be great.
All right, cool. So that's Tilly. You're very addicted to the cause now.
Completely.
So you go, give me another pup.
Yep.
Who do you got?
I got Xander.
Okay.
And Xander was absolutely awesome. He was fantastic, a fantastic dog. I took him through all of the usual things. We were socially active. We did a lot of environmental work. And I even took him to the local obedience club.
Okay.
And he was so great there. Everyone was so impressed with him because he was obviously very full on, but so sociable and so easy to keep in order that they actually gave him a certificate for passing the basic obedience course.
Yeah, right.
Which, of course, the RAF members didn't really want, but I was thrilled that they thought enough of him. They knew that he was a foster pup, but they thought enough of him to include him in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my memory gets a bit foggy from those days, but I believe the X litter was a repeat of the T litter. And they were equally as powerful, if not maybe edged them out a little bit. But
yes.
But super powerful litters.
Yes, and he was suddenly gone because I was still involved in fostering. And when I looked for him on the radar after he went back and I was looking for my next pup, he was no longer there, and I did hear that he'd moved on to a top unit, so that was good.
When he ended up coming into development, there was a couple of us that saw that he was probably a level above what the RAF needed. So that's when another unit was contacted, and he went off and worked with them.
Yes.
So it's good to see that certain dogs are able to get into the right hands.
For sure, yeah. To live their best life.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so Tilly, Xander, what's next?
Then I had General.
Okay.
And he was interesting. He was a good dog too, but he was a bit more laid back. And he had fun at my place, though. He actually caught a couple of moorhens and had those for lunch. So, yeah, that was pretty incredible because they're very fast, but he was faster.
Okay.
Yes, and General, he went on and he graduated his course. He did quite well. There was nothing really spectacular about General that stands out to me, but he was a good dog.
Just a worker.
Yes, exactly that.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know where he ended up?
I do not, but I do know he turned up on an Ivan Balabanov course in WA. I think it was WA, over here. And I think he may have come from Sydney. I'm not sure.
After General, you pick up pup Coda.
Coda. Yeah, I had so much hope for Coda. He was so fantastic. I really thought I was getting another Xander. He was a really great dog. And so he went back full steam ahead after his foster period. And then we went out to see General's graduation out at Amberley, and we were talking to you, and you mentioned that Coda wasn't doing well. So that was a bit sad. I was quite surprised to hear that. So my dear husband suggested that we, being the royal we, maybe could take him back and do some more work with him, which at the time I thought was quite scary, because it's one thing to start a pup and another thing to take one back that's having problems that's actually now like a juvenile. But there was a lot of support around the idea, so I decided to give it a go, and we took him back, and I had a lot of support, and fantastically he came through and became a successful working dog as well. He passed his course.
Excellent. Yeah, I do remember that dog.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that you had fostered him, and I was obviously working under my boss, Sergeant Ribel,
Yes.
Grant Ribel, and we were looking at this dog and who wasn't doing very well. But we went in and we were reading his word picture, and it told a very different story to the dog that we were looking at. And we were did some homework into it, and it turns out that he ended up on the wrong side of one of the developers who didn't think much of him, and he was kind of put aside.
Yeah.
But from the word picture that we'd read, it read quite like a very very competent dog. And so that's when we kind of brainstormed a little bit and spoke to you, and we did something that wasn't really done back then. We asked if you'd take him back and kind of bring him out of his shell again. That definitely wasn't done back then. But
wow, it was a great experience. And I remember when they brought him back to me, they brought him out of the ute, and he came across the ground to me, and he pulled whoever had him on the lead to me, and then he wrapped his legs around me like, oh my God, I'm back.
yeah.
So, I just said to him, mate, it's all been a bad dream. We're going back to square one and you'll be fine.
Okay.
I knew that dog was still in there. We just had to peel back the layers and let him express himself again.
Okay, so obviously very different going from a pup to a really a juvenile.
Yes.
You saw him both times. How was that kind of moving to a more juvenile dog rather than a pup?
Well, I knew what he was, and I knew that dog was inside him, and the people around me had experienced him as a great pup as well. So we tried just to work through the problems that he was having. Also, what stood out to me, he loved to move across the ground in a really rhythmic fashion, and I'd noticed that since he was little. So once you got him into that zone where he could be really free and moving, he would settle and get really comfortable in himself. So I did a lot of work with him physically, hiking and doing a lot of things like that. And I built him up physically. And as he built up physically, he also built up mentally. When I take him hiking, I used to take a photo of him from where I stood behind him holding the lead. At first his profile was really flat and dull. But as he progressed and got stronger mentally especially, he lifted and his head came up, he muscled up, his ears were always pricked, and he became an absolute powerhouse on the end of the line. He'd pull out in front of me, which is what I wanted him to do. And he really, really enjoyed that work. And getting him in the right frame of mind, it really got him started on the right track. And of course, we still took him out, socialised him, took him to shopping centres, all the things that you do in that regard. I still did obstacle work. I still went to the sport dog club with him and just made him a whole dog and brought back the original puppy.
Okay, awesome. He must have come back well because he went on the course, so tick in the box. Good on you.
It was funny because the handler who had him, she was quite upset because he wouldn't out initially when he was doing his training. And Sergeant Ribel was talking to me about that, and we were having a bit of a laugh because when I got him back, he wouldn't bite. So it was quite a thing. And I remember Grant Ribel said, to her, don't worry, there's a lot worse things than not outing, which, of course, in that pup's case was not biting.
Yeah.
But he overcame all that.
So you go through that experience. Where did he end up, do you know?
He initially went to Adelaide. He was down there with his handler, and that was a lady. But I know that she's now a mum, and so I'm not quite sure. She's out of the RAF, and I'm not quite sure where that dog is now, but I'm sure he's successful.
Yeah. All right. Then next pup?
So the next pup was Striker, and he was a fun dog. He was just great from the get-go, no trouble, just enjoyed everything, loved being a part of the family, so to speak. And yeah, he was successful, and he ended up at Amberley.
Who'd you have from there?
After that, we had Ulf, ULF, and he was fantastic puppy, really, really fabulous. He was already a bit of a poster child. He was quite a fluffy dog, and he'd been in photos to promote the foster program, and also in reference to things to do with Anzac Day. There's photos of him with Mark Donaldson, things like that around. And he was a really, really great pup to work. I just think it would have been good for him to have been able to go on. I don't think he's ever going to be required to do everything he could have done in his role just as a RAF dog. No disrespect to the RAF dogs.
No, of course not.
But it would have been awesome to see him go further, I think.
Okay. So all these dogs that we've just been talking about, they're all Malinois?
Yes, or parts there. I guess they are technically Malinois, but I think the breeding is a little different in some cases. There.
Yeah, of course. The genetics is always varied. The RAF do that very deliberately. They want a good cross-section of dogs, so they're always trying different formulas to bring out the best in a Malinois. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yep.
So from Tilly to Ulf, obviously they would have been all very different.
Very different.
What lessons did you learn over the breadth of that development?
I think what I learned was to really see the puppy and see the dog for what it is, and realise that every single one is different, and they've all got a different way of expressing themselves. They've all got something to teach you. And what's really, really important to me with all of this is I believe that the dog comes with everything it needs, is already there. And it's our job with puppies to expose that, to bring it out, and to promote all those good qualities, to develop all those good qualities. And it's different with every single dog.
Yeah. I guess if you don't see those qualities, they're maybe not destined to be a working dog.
Exactly.
That would have given you a lot of experience over that time. That's a lot of pups, and I'm sure the RAF is very thankful for having a dedicated foster carer.
Yeah, and I was very grateful to have the opportunity to do it. I loved it.
Yeah, okay. All right. So you've done the Sport Dog Club. In the background, you're still doing that while you're raising pups for the RAF.
Yep.
From there, Canine Solutions comes onto the scene.
Yes.
So how did that work?
I still had Ulf at that stage, and you got in touch with me, and you were starting to get going with Canine Solutions. I was following along with the early dogs online, having a look at how they were going. And you got in touch with me and asked if I was interested to come on board and foster pups for Canine Solutions. And you said to me, you don't have to answer right now, you can think about it. And so I thought about it for like 1.5 seconds, and then I said, yes, I'll do it.
Yeah,
so,
excellent.
yeah, got started there.
The difference between raising a RAF pup and raising a Canine SA pup?
Well, I understood from the beginning that Canine SA were developing dogs to go to the highest level. So I knew that everything I did with those pups, I had to focus on where they were headed, think about what their life was going to look like at the end of their time when they actually went into their working roles. So I made sure I tried to make sure that everything I did brought out the best in the pup from day one.
We were looking for a very particular product.
Yes.
A high-end product.
Exactly.
So we maybe gave you a bit more guideline, I guess.
Yes. I got started. You ensured that the environmental stuff was very, very important. So we actually built some stuff at home that was more real world, like obstacle courses that might be met in actual areas, not just training setups, but natural type of environments. So we did that, and I understood what you required regarding the dog's skills. So we were able to start on the foundation of a lot of the skills. We were able to start them basically on their tracking. We're also doing a lot of box exercises, some basic obedience work, introducing them to muzzles, and doggles and force fetch, all that type of thing we got started with. But just in the very early stages, getting the foundations.
Yeah, so just looking to create a very bold puppy, basically, an open, bold puppy.
Yeah, and a dog that's comfortable with every situation.
Yeah. Well, as many as we can put forth anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. Moving on, the development picture. So hopefully over time, our development picture progresses, changes, becomes something different. What has that looked like for you?
Well, starting with sport dogs is one thing, because everything is contained in a training system. It's on the field, it's set exercises. You do all of these things that mimic real world activity, and that goes to every bite sport, I think. And there are some people who believe that their sport dog, whatever sport they do, would equal a working dog. But I've learned from seeing what goes on in the real world of working dogs, that's simply not true. Because, it's all set up in the sport world to earn points, for the dog to be successful, the handler to be successful, for people to get titles. But when you step into the working dog world, it's not like that at all. And the dogs from day one have to know and believe in themselves that they're completely bomb-proof and that no matter what happens, they can cope. And that's a much, much bigger picture.
Yeah, not taking away from the sport dog, because I've
No,
seen weapons in both fields. The way I kind of saw it is that the sport dog world was very regimented, very structured.
Yep.
Whereas the working dogs need to account for the anomalies, for the unknowns.
Yes.
And they need to be able to cope with that.
Because they're going to work in certain scenarios off-leash, independently, and never really know what's coming. You can't set it up for them in advance.
Yeah. Some people see the stuff on Facebook and they go, well, why are you treating the dog like that? Well, one, trust me, the dog loves every minute of it. But what we're trying to do is empower them to be strong enough to cope with those anomalies. For example, say that bad guy that's high on meth and just isn't feeling anything, and he's fighting, and it doesn't matter that there's a dog attached to his arm or part of his body. So that dog needs to be able to learn that he is strong enough to keep fighting, to keep going, to help his partner so that no one gets seriously hurt or dies.
That's it.
So super important.
Yes.
Anything else to add with that development picture, Desley?
Well, I think it's always a learning thing. You never ever stop learning. You always see more and more. And if you think you know, then you definitely don't know. And just watching each dog grow is inspirational in itself.
Yeah. And you get influences from all the spectrum. So
Yes.
I definitely watch sport dog stuff and go, you know what, I could take that technique and I could try and make it my own. Or I watch a Bart Bellin and I go, I could try and take that and make that my own. Even I see on occasion, I've been lucky enough to work with some young RAF handlers who don't have as much experience, but they look at things from a different perspective. Or a young army handler who looks at things from a different perspective, and you go, well, why did you do that? And they go, for this reason or that reason. And you go, well, okay, I've been doing this a long time, but I never looked at it like that. And you're able to hopefully glean something from that and maybe kind of make it your own. So that's the beauty of the industry that we're in.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It is.
All right, Desley. So just popping back to, I know we spoke about it earlier, back when you were kind of starting out and your influences with the Gold Coast Sport Dog Club, and they were getting trainers in from Europe and the US. Obviously, you've evolved, so I would imagine your influences, while retaining those early influences, you've kind of gleamed more, or there's other people who've come on the scene.
Yeah, well,
What else you got?
Well, I've been really, really privileged to be over here and do a wonderful seminar with Ivan Balabanov. And I think he's someone who spreads across all areas. He's done so much variety in his dog training world. He's done a bit of everything, I think. And he's one of the originators of a lot of the things that we use in dog sport today. So that was a wonderful thing to see him, and he thinks everything through and puts it all into practice according to each individual dog, which is really inspiring. Also, it's been wonderful to do the NEPO-PO work. I did that here in WA as well, and that's incredible. It gives you a great foundation for when you're actually training the dog to do the tasks required for the handler. So I see that as something a little bit separate from just developing the puppy. For me, the training, all of those training scenarios come in a little bit later down the track when you want them to work for you specifically on different tasks. Yeah. So that's been wonderful.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, that's Bart and Michael Bellin's negative positive system, NEPO-PO, which has heavily influenced us in later years.
Yes, really, really wonderful. And it brings out the very best in every dog as far as their training goes, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But for me, the standout thing that I've done in dog training was going to the symposium that Canine Solutions held in 2019. That was held out at Bindoon, and it was absolutely amazing. Every government agency that has a dog capability was represented there. And to see those guys working and training every day, doing the things that they do every day in their lives was just amazing. Seeing the dogs come through, hearing their experiences, seeing them putting into practice was just awesome.
Yeah, it was a great event. It was great interacting with all those different agencies. There's just such a broad spectrum of knowledge and experience.
Incredible.
It was great little get-together.
Yeah.
All right. So you've been raising, I guess we've probably been going for about 5 or 6 years now. You've been raising puppies for us. But then when we created the Virtus House Kennel establishment, we brought you on board to help us with our litters that were born.
Yep.
My lovely wife, Lisa, wears a lot of the brunt of the early period from birth to about the 4-week mark, which is quite, while the pups can't do anything, it's super intensive. There's a lot that needs to be done to make that right.
But Lisa is such a natural mother. She just fills that role brilliantly, I reckon.
Yeah, it's worked out really well. Hey, she's a natural at it
for sure.
And then at about the 4-week mark, we bring in you, our puppy expert. We don't push, but we do push. So let's talk about that.
So every puppy obviously has its own personality. So you see that very, very early before they're even mobile. So you sort of see what you're working with as far as that goes. So we can already plan little events, little adventures to get them started. And as soon as they're ready, they get up and they get going. So every little thing in their day becomes a little bit of a challenge, just really easy, but they have to make an effort. And there's no puppy that doesn't do that. They all enjoy that side of things. They like to work for everything they do. It's in their nature, in their genetics, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is. It really is part of who they are and who the Malinois is, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And they're fortunate that they have their mum, Kibby. She's a great role model for them, and she takes up her role really brilliantly throughout that period. And we can set them off on the right path.
Yeah, she can definitely teach them things that we can't. So.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to watch her do that. And I think we learn about dog behaviour and how to deal with situations by watching her do things by instinct.
Yes, absolutely. So from that 4-week to that 8-week mark, what are we looking at? What are we covering? Or not everything, but what are you looking to cover to make these dogs better, to make them more open?
Okay, so we want to get them out as quickly as possible into the world. And as they come out, they have to make an effort to get over things, to walk on different surfaces, to feel different movements. So they're straight away onto things that move under them. They have to climb up, they have to go down. They go under, over, through. They learn that very early. And they work for every mouthful of food they get from us. So that's always an incentive. Come over here and try this and you'll get rewarded. So they learn food drive as well. And then as they get stronger, their world gets bigger and we expand into larger obstacles, more interesting obstacles, more slightly difficult scenarios, so they have to strive harder. Then when they work their way to the end of the yard, we open the gate, and then we all go out into the paddock, and the world gets bigger again.
Okay, what else?
Well, they're very, very keen. Then once they get out and about, they want to expand their world. So then we get to take them to more interesting places, different places where they experience more things. So we were privileged enough to get to go to the Whippersnapper Distillery, and the guys there are happy to have us, and people come along and interact with them and get to play with them and see them in that environment. The pups get to experience another environment. They get to travel in the vehicle. They get to be in and out of crates, all the things that they're going to be doing in their future life.
Yeah, we really are thankful for our relationship with Whippersnapper Distillery. The guys there, they go out of their way to help us, and they welcome us with open arms, and the puppies take over the distillery.
They do, yeah.
And people come in and they grab a coffee and they come in and they interact with the pups. And that's really their first experience outside of the yard environment.
Yeah, and the family and people that come into them.
Yeah, so it's a super important step. And these guys, the Whippersnapper guys, they make it easy.
Yeah,
for
you
us.
look forward to going.
Yeah, hats off to those guys. If
Yeah.
you're in the Perth area or you're thinking of coming over, get down to the distillery, meet those guys.
Buy a T-shirt.
Buy a T-shirt, buy some booze. But so, yeah, get down there. But so that's really their first step out is the distillery. And where do we go from there? So that's kind of towards the end of their 8 weeks. What else are we kind of covering?
Well, we're covering in between that, we're doing some basic crate training, teaching them to come in and out of crates. They spend their time in there. They enjoy going in because they know they're going to get rewarded for going in. We throw a little bit of kibble. Then we wait till they go in and then we throw the kibble. They relax in there, expecting it to be a good place. So that sort of sets them up again for their next stage of their lives when they're off with whoever.
Yep.
And then they, of course, sleep outside in a crated area that's fenced off, enclosed, and they're very safe and comfortable. They learn when they go, just before they go into that nighttime scenario, they go and do their toileting. So we give them those routines at early age so that that's instilled in them for their future as well. And, of course, first thing in the morning, we open the door. The first thing they do is come roaring across into their toileting area again. So that's their start and their end of the day. They learn that routine.
Yeah, so let's emphasise that for a sec. Something so small is so impactful. So Desley and Lisa are up super early to get those dogs out, to get them onto the grass, to get them to toilet on the grassed area rather than where they live and where they work and where they play. So by the time they're 7 weeks, honestly, we look at them, we let them out, and they haven't toileted in their living area at all.
That's right, yes.
So really setting them up, really you guys doing that extra little bit just sets them up for success and sets future owners up for success as well.
I mean, there's always going to be accidents. There's always going to be times when it doesn't quite work out, but the dogs learn that routine and it's instilled in them.
Yeah. These little 1%ers are so crucial in the development of the pup. I think we go a little bit above and beyond what you would normally see out there, and I honestly think it shows in the pups that we develop as to the product that they become.
Yeah. And they get to go other places. Like recently we took them to a hall where there's lots of slippery floors, rooms in and out, staircases built into the little stage that was there. They got to run around on that. They got to play with toys, up and down, chase each other. And they spent a little bit of time in crates when the other dogs came out and did some work, did some scent work. So that was another great experience. They were able to go out onto a concrete area and toilet, quite fresh there. And, it was a great day for them.
Even that. So they're in crates. Big dogs are working. hats off to Perth Scentworks that allow us to be there. And they were in crates, nice and quiet, just watching the big dogs work. Again, a 1%er that goes into creating a super balanced dog.
Yeah, so because they're nice and quiet, the big dogs go away, finish their tasks. So when they're nice and quiet is when we open the crates and let them out. We don't let them out if they're screaming and carrying on, which they weren't anyway.
Yeah.
But they learn, you're calm in your crate, then you come out and have fun.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent, Desley. All right, we're getting to the end of our time here. So let's have some final thoughts. So we've talked about your time from your early influences to Sport Dog Club to RAF to Canine Solutions, the evolution from the start of Canine Solutions to the end. It's been a hell of a journey.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What's in store next?
Oh, well, I just hope more of the same. I just love every minute of it. And it's never-ending learning curve. As we've said on, every puppy is different, every dog is different, and you're always learning more techniques, you're always learning more nuances to use and to help you on the journey of the pups and the journey of the more developed dogs. And it's a great thing.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we are very fortunate to have you on board, one of the cornerstones of Canine Solutions. Thanks for coming in, Desley.
Thank you, Jason. I just love all we do.
Excellent. All right, everyone. See ya.